should firms prudently adjust their strategies given that they may have new deadlines and more time to achieve them?
I think firstly, the firm should really size the challenge for their organization. So what entities are in scope? How complex are those entities? Are they separately managed accounts? Are they being managed by multiple firms, or are they proprietary funds? So all this comes into factor in terms of what you will need to support the uncleared margin requirements as it goes into effect. I think once you size the challenge, is really looking at the operational gaps that you have within your institution and addressing those gaps. So do you need a new custodian? If you need a new custodian, you need to get new custody docs. If you have a custodian, start to speak to them about what their uncleared margin rule offerings are. Are you going to go third party or tri-party in terms of the custody model? How are you going to calculate your IM requirements? How are you thinking about moving assets to meet those margin requirements? How are you thinking about liquidity? So, in order to raise the assets that are eligible as collateral, do you have those readily available or not? If not, you need to figure out how you're going to get them. If you have them readily available, does that have any kind of drag to your current portfolio? So thinking really holistically about, what the size of the issue is and what it is that you need to resolve in order to be successful is really important in setting out that criteria. Once you understand the objectives of your project or the criteria that you need to meet, it's really thinking about how much time do you have to get there. So I think, obviously some market participants now have additional time, but a lot of market participants are still in scope for 2020. So I think in terms of the original sizing, we still believe that about 1/3 of the original market participants for phase 5 are still phase 5, whereas about 2/3 have been moved to 2021. For those still in scope for 2020, you may have a lot less time to get these objectives achieved, whereas for 2021, you may have more time and maybe you want to start looking at your overall collateral processes as opposed to just looking specifically at the one-off requirements for UMR.
What should firms be doing if they know that their clients are in scope?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question because I think the term clients can be used in multiple dimensions, right? So if you think about uncleared margin rules, the swap dealers and major swap participants who have already come into scope, the clients are their counterparties. And so I think they're reaching out to them to start documentation. There's a lot of education going on in terms of what it is that they need from their counterparts in order to ensure that they remain compliant. If you think about it from a lens of a custodian or a service provider, they have a huge amount of clients that are impacted by the uncleared margin rules in Wave 5 and Wave 6. And so for them, they're thinking about, how do they handle the capacity of bringing on, all these new, or not necessarily new business, but new accounts and new mandates to provide services. And then if you think of it from a perspective of an asset manager, they're really thinking about their clients or the funds that they're managing. So for them, it's an education down to their clients, but it's also trying to understand which of the funds are actually impacted. So there's a data challenge there that's specific to the asset management space where when you think about separately managed accounts, they're managed by multiple asset managers by definition, and each of them only knows a piece of the puzzle. So when they're thinking about the ANA calc that brings them into scope, and they're thinking about thresholds that defines when they have to start to post IF, that's shared against multiple asset managers. And so they really need to get that information of in scope or not from the underlying client. So there's definitely an information exchange that needs to occur.
How should the firm and its internal groups effectively set and then review its goals to meet the UMR specifications?
Yeah, so I think I touched about this a little bit in the first question, but really as people are thinking about their project plan, once you have your criteria set, it's really working with your service providers and your custodians to understand their time frame. So if I just talk generic timelines, most market participants are all coming into scope in September 1st, 2020 or September 1st, 2021. The custodians streetwide are generally setting a cutoff date for documentation to be complete of March 1st, so it allows them time to onboard all these clients, given the size of or breadth of industry impact. So you work back from March 1st. Well, if you're one fund negotiating legals with 10 counterparts, which is probably quite a small scope, you're still negotiating about 30 to 50 legal agreements. So if you start to compound that with multiple funds, multiple counterparties, it's a huge legal lift. And so I would recommend for most firms to start to think about using 6 months for that time period. So now you work back from March 1st, you're now in September 1st the year before, and before you even get to being able to start that legal documentation, you need to know your service providers, custodians, et cetera. So there's a planning process before that. So let's say it's an 18-month turnaround. So we're already in December of, or almost, we're mid-November of 2019, which means those in 2020 don't have a lot of time. So if they haven't started yet, they have to probably really focus on key objectives just to be compliant. For those in 2021, they actually do have a lot of time to be thoughtful in terms of how they execute on the Uncleared Margin Rules and really think about what is it that they see from an organization perspective as being their strategy and trying to incorporate those broader themes into their project plan.